Hello everybody, welcome to this video. Today I'll be taking you through 30 essential annotations that you should be familiar with when developing RESTful web services using Spring Boot. With no time to waste, let's jump right into it. The first annotation I want to walk you through is the addREST-controller annotation. This annotation is used to define a class as a RESTful web service controller, and it combines the addController and addResponseBody annotations, which means that it can be used to map HTTP requests to specific methods and then return the response directly as a JSON or XML data. The next annotation is addRequestMapping. This annotation is used to map HTTP requests to specific methods in a RESTful web service controller. It can be used to define the URI path, the HTTP method, and other request parameters within the controller. The next annotation is the addPath variable annotation. This is used to extract a variable from the URI path in a RESTful web service endpoint. It can be used to define dynamic parameters in the URI path, such as ID for retrieving a specific resource. Next is the addRequestBody annotation. This annotation is used to map the HTTP request body to a Java object in a RESTful web service endpoint. It can be used to accept JSON or XML data in a request body and then maps it to a Java object for processing. The next annotation is the response status annotation. This annotation is used to define the HTTP response status code for a RESTful web service endpoint, and it can be used to define a custom status code such as 201 created for a successful post request and 404 when an object is not found, etc. Now, if you're enjoying this video up to now, please take a moment to hit the like button, and if you have not yet subscribed to this channel, kindly do so. The next annotation is the addRequestParam annotation. This annotation is used to bind a request parameter to a meta parameter in a Spring controller. The next one is the addExceptionHandler. This is used to specify a method to handle exception thrown by your controller. And next is the addSpringBoot annotation. Now, this annotation is the combination of three annotations: addConfiguration, addAutoConfiguration, and addComponentScan. It is typically placed on the main class of your application, and it serves as a convenient way to enable all features provided by those three annotations. addConfiguration annotation. This annotation is used to indicate that a class is a Spring configuration class, and the configuration classes are provided basically by being definitions and other configuration information to the Spring context. They are typically used to define beans that need to be created by the Spring container, such as data source, objects, or maybe web service client, etc. addComponentScan. The addComponentScan annotation is used to specify the base package for component scanning. Component scanning is a process by which Spring looks for classes annotated with addComponent, addService, addRepository, and other similar annotations, and it registers them as beans in the Spring context. So by default, Spring Boot will scan all components in the package that contains the main application class. Enable auto configuration. This annotation is used to enable Spring Boot's auto configuration feature. Auto configuration uses class path scanning, right, and reflection to automatically configure certain aspects of the application based on the dependencies and other settings provided. For example, if the application you are working on includes the Spring Data JPA dependency, Spring Boot will automatically configure a data source and an entity manager for you to use with JPA. The next annotation is the addAutoWired annotation. This annotation is used to automatically wire the bean dependency. So when you place the auto wire annotation on a constructor, um, setter method, maybe even a field, Spring will automatically will not automatically, but it will attempt to like find matching bean in the application context and inject it. This eliminates the need for manual configuration of dependency in XML or maybe Java-based configuration. Add qualifier annotation. The add qualifier annotation in conjunction with auto-wired, the add auto-wire annotation that we talked about earlier, is used to specify the exact bean to be injected. If there are multiple beans of the same type, the context of same type in the Spring context, the add qualifier allows you to select the specific bean to inject by the name. Now, before we continue, I would like to kindly remind you once more to like this video. It helps with the YouTube algorithm. And also, if you have not yet subscribed, kindly consider doing so. The next annotation here is the add transactional annotation. This annotation is used to mark a method or an entire class as transactional. When you use this annotation on a method, Spring will automatically begin a transaction before the method is called and commit or either roll back the transaction when the method completes. So transactions ensures that the transactions they ensure that all database operations are atomic and consistent. The next annotation here is the async annotation. This annotation is used to indicate that a method should be executed asynchronously. So when you place this annotation on a method, Spring will automatically create a new thread to execute the method and then return immediately, allowing the calling thread to continue processing. Add controller advice. Now this annotation is used to define global exception handling. For a Spring application, when an exception is thrown from a controller method, Spring will first look for an exception handler method in the same controller. And if it does not find one, it will look in any class or classes that is annotated with add controller advice to search for the exception handler. Add require args constructor. Now this annotation is a feature provided by the Lombok library, which can be used in Spring Boot application to automatically generate constructors for classes that have final fields. To use the require args constructor in Spring Boot application, you will need to add the Lombok dependency to your project's build configuration file. Add data. The add data annotation it helps you to generate setters, getters for all fields in your class. It also helps you to generate toString method, an equal method, and even a hash code method. So this annotation is often used to create lightweight Bojo class. No args constructor. This annotation is used to generate a no argument constructor for a class. This is useful when you need to create instances of a class without passing any argument into its constructor. Add all args constructor. This annotation is used basically to generate a constructor that takes argument for all fields in a class. And by the way, these are all Lombok constructors and annotation constructors. This is useful when you need to create an instance of a class and set all of its fields in one go. The add builder annotation. This annotation generates a builder pattern for your class. This pattern allows you to create instances of a class by chaining methods called together, and it can make the code more readable and easier to maintain. The builder pattern, in fact, is especially useful when you have a class with many optional fields. Add component annotation. The add component annotation is a generic stereotype annotation for any Spring managed component. It is used to mark a Java class as a Spring managed bean, and it enables the class to be automatically detected and registered by Spring. Add service annotation. The add service annotation is a specialization of the add component annotation, okay? And it is used to mark a class as a service component in the service layer of our Spring application. So it is typically used to define business logic and other services. The add repository annotation is also a specialization of the add component annotation, and it is used to mark a class as a repository component, and it is used in the persistence layer of a Spring application. Basically, it is used to define DAO classes and database access logic. Add controller annotation. This annotation is used to mark a class as a controller component, and it is mainly used in the web layer of a Spring application. It is typically used to define request handling methods for web requests. The add bean annotation. This annotation is used to indicate that a method produces a bean to be managed by Spring. So the method is responsible for creating and configuring the bean, which will be returned by Spring when requested. The next annotation is add profile annotation. This annotation is used to specify which profile a bean should be included in. Profiles are used to specify different configuration for different environments, such as development, testing, or pre-production. Add value annotation. The add value annotation is used to inject a value from a properties file, or maybe your application.yaml file, or a system environment variable into a Spring managed bean. It can be used to inject simple values like strings or integers, or complex objects like lists or even maps. Add property source. The add property source annotation is used to specify the location of a properties file that contains key value pairs that can be injected into Spring managed bean using the add value annotation. Add configuration properties. Now, add configuration properties is used to bind a configuration property file to a Java class. So it allows developers to specify default value for properties and to validate the configuration properties at runtime. So that is the end of this video. I hope you enjoy it. Stay tuned to this channel, subscribe, like this video, and share with your friend. Catch you in the next one.